have a podcast called Already Dead. They were just on. We brought them back because they got nothing but heat. He is Jose Galison and Austin Wade Picard. How are you guys?
Doing good, doing good. Pleasure to be with you again. We have been looking forward to this one. This episode today is kind of the Grand Pumbaya. This is kind of the culmination of our months and months of our show and stuff. We've been circling around the schizo drain for quite a while, so we're glad to share it with you.
Well, I love talking to you guys. You know, I do a show with Austin. Jose, you are always welcome. It's just probably too late for you, but you are always welcome.
I literally messaged you last time, you dicks, and then I think no one checked the messages. I happened to be up late that night. But
we will send you it every time, and you can join us every time.
I'll be sleeping most times, but one of these days I'll make it.
You can join us. It's called Whatever This Is, and it's premium content and it is great. Super excited. So one more time, can you tell them where they can find you, and then let's get into it.
Well, it is a little bit complicated with us. For me, I have the No Way Jose podcast. Austin is the Underclass podcast. Me and him come together and we do two shows under the banner of these podcasts. They stream to both our platforms. We're on all the typical platforms, so either No Way Jose or Underclass, preferably both. But we put out every week, Already Dead. We do a live call-in show, and we also do a daily either me or Austin's hosting it, but it's always streaming to both our platforms at 10 a.m. Eastern. We do a kind of a daily, sometimes we dig into some old stuff, sometimes mostly current events, just kind of a live stream, a daily live stream at 10 a.m. Eastern. But today we come with you bearing Gladio fruit. This is where kind of what we all read, all roads kind of lead back to Gladio. That's what our research keeps to come circling back to over and over again. And so I guess we can kind of start at some place. I can pass it off to Austin. I think he deserves an intro as well, probably.
You guys are two of the best researchers in the game. Austin, where can they find you?
All right, brother. First of all, I am not used to using Zoom. So the fact that I can't see you guys is throwing me off so bad, just because I'm so used to like looking into the eyes of the people I'm having a conversation with.
Sorry.
But
So what you're going to see is what's on camera here. It's going to be what the people watching this are going to see. So you'll see Sam when he's talking typically, and then.
Awesome, man. I'm just, I'm kind of a victim of like I'm a very pattern oriented person, and so like I get very used to certain. yeah, exactly. But hey, man. I think I'm just used to, again, like I love getting the reaction out of people. It's kind of what drives me to be more passionate in the moment, and I can't help myself. So, but it's okay, no worries at all.
Luckily for us, Sam's not quiet about it.
Yeah, no, not typically. But yeah, so you guys, of course, everyone, you can follow me at the Underclass podcast, and I pretty much, man, I've been doing some interesting deep dives as far as my research is concerned personally. Like the most recent solo project that I've done was a 4-hour episode on the Fort Bragg murders that happened in 1969 or 1970, like 6 months after the Manson murders, and it's very eerily similar as far as that I believe that there was essentially, there were cult members of a local coven that were practicing the ideology of the Process Church of the Final Judgment, and you have actual members that were within this cult group that were effectively a part of what was called the corpse cadaver connection, is what it was called, and essentially it was this widespread drug trafficking operation, right, very large scale. And this was happening during the Vietnam War, right? And it's very interesting because it seems as if there was a very well-established operation where they were utilizing these various military bases. And then also they had compromised certain local narcotics investigators as well from the local PD, but then also the MPs, right? So the military police were effectively compromised. And so they were facilitating this network of, and then they were also participating in the mass distribution domestically, as far as the heroin production and the trafficking was concerned, especially through Fort Bragg. But there were also other military bases that were prioritized. But anyway,
So you're
it's very
saying
interesting.
military bases. I don't want to get too far from what you guys want to talk about.
Yeah, man,
what you're
I shouldn't
saying-
even be bringing this
No,
up,
it's fine,
to be
it's
honest.
fine.
Like, this was not at all planned.
It's fine.
I was just pitching my
Because
my
people
last
don't
solo
realize
episode.
when it comes with the military, like a lot of the free trade deals we have was struck by the military with these countries going, if you allow us to put bases in your country, you can tariff the fuck out of American goods and not, I mean, we won't tariff any of your goods. And why is that important? Because, you know, I've always said this, man, if you really want to, like, you really do a deep dive into air quotes, terrorism, you'll realize that these guys are basically just children who grow up to be men in traumatized areas where their whole families were just annihilated and there is no work. The only work there is in these proxy armies, these proxy military groups, which we call ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all that stuff that we fund, we form, we train, we fund. So if you get rid of all the jobs here, what's left? The military. You want no jobs around, so everybody has to join the military. In California, more jobs have gone to the government than any other sector. That's not good.
I mean, you got to think about it. I mean, they bring in people to recruit you in high school.
Yep.
They're literally like, oh, do this. And it's a good pitch, though. I'm not, everyone thinks about it. They got you doing pull-ups. They got the strongest, buffest guy there. Every girl wants him. You're like, dude, I could be that guy.
You be at a Dodger game. Hey, please welcome Colonel Xavier Guerrero.
Oh my god.
Okay, so let's get into what you guys want to talk about.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, I'll bring it in and I'll pass it off to our resident, information extraordinaire individual over here, Austin. Gladio. This is kind of what we've been honing in on. Gladio. Now there is the actual Operation Gladio, and then there is like what colloquially people mean when we speak of it, particularly in these parapolitical circles. Now, Gladio was an actual operation that happened post World War II, kind of Cold War. The idea it was a stay behind units. Essentially they left people behind, kind of to fight against communism. Assuming there was going to be a red wave coming soon. How this presents itself is probably most notably in like the days of lead over in Italy, where they were kind of funding. They were kind of essentially making the communists look bad by perpetrating false flag attacks. Not far be it for me to like commies, by the way, but either way, they were using false flag attacks to frame them, and there's many examples of this. So when we speak of Gladio, this is what we a lot of times are referring to. Essentially, the way I like to break it down for normies in a lot of times is kind of like, hey, you ever heard about Operation Northwoods? Well, it's that actually you're being carried out. A lot of people don't know the chief of staff, Lemnitzer, when he actually wasn't the one who proposed the idea of Northwoods to Kennedy. He then gets shit canned, goes over to NATO, and then ends up being the one that's presiding over it during the period of Gladio. So essentially, that is Gladio being carried out there. Now, what we wanted to kind of talk about is not specifically Gladio, but the idea of just kind of how everything kind of comes back to Gladio and how this is multifaceted thing. We sent you over notes, kind of the multiple themes. You can kind of go into Satanism. You can go into cults. You can go into, MK Ultra. I mean,
everything,
snuff films, like everything. It all ties into it. It all comes back to itself. And then also it's like tied into so many different things. Like we gave you a list of different things. Like I think probably the best one to kind of start with, I actually just did an episode on this on William Ramsey's show, who he's great. We love him. We have him on the show quite frequently. But I covered the Dutroux affair on there. And this is probably one of the best examples of kind of what me and Austin are driving at here. The Dutroux affair was essentially, it's kind of a misnomer, the Dutroux affair. Dutroux was an unimportant character in the scheme of things. He really was, you can almost make parallels to the Epstein thing, except for he was kind of lower on the totem pole than even Epstein. But essentially, he was a guy who was kidnapping, he was procuring children for a network, a larger network. Come to find out that when you start digging into these networks, this is the same exact networks that are extremely tied in, if not indistinguishable from NATO. There were also, like, for example, the Brabant killings that happened in Belgium during that time. So these were all individuals. These are same people running cover for this sex trafficking ring that's happening in the background. And so you tie this all in, and you see these fingerprints of the military police in the area covering everything up. This also is a huge hub for NATO. I mean, there's a whole lot of different ways. I'll pass this off to Austin because I look like he's chomping at the bit to kind of dig into.
Just quick.
Go ahead.
For those who aren't familiar, who is Dutroux?
Austin, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I got it. So Mark Dutroux, right? I think first of all, hold on, let me pull you guys.
Is
back.
there a reason why there's a sketching of him on Wikipedia and there's not an actual picture of him?
That is bizarre. There's plenty of
That
pictures.
is
Yeah,
strange,
that's
but you can
that's
pull
weird to
up
me,
the
too.
pictures for sure.
Well, with Wikipedia, they have to be Creative Commons images. They have the rights to, so it's possible that all the images of him, someone owns the rights to them.
Right. Yeah. So really, Mark Dutroux, he was arrested, but this basically what had happened was this country. It was a notorious pedophile, right? Is obviously who this was, but at the same time, like you have to keep in mind that there was when this was kind of disclosed to the public, it was originally like a lot of this was published in '96. That was describing, how this kind of took place when 4 little girls were kidnapped for the sex trade and exhumed from the dungeon prisons that became their tombs, basically. There's a political leader and his henchmen arrested for the contract murder of a government official. A child prostitution ring is exposed, and every day following, there are these like hints going in through as far as like public disclosure, hints of official cover-ups, police bungling. You have tampered evidence and judicial incompetence. You have the original judge Conrath was removed from the case. But the best way to kind of like because you have to also realize that Belgium in this time, it's completely ridden with it's been explained and described as a mafia-ridden banana republic. And so I kind of think that's
what country is this?
Belgium.
Belgium.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's very interesting, especially in the terms of Gladio, because these Gladio countries that are very it's interesting. They're very overrepresented when it comes to, of course, these environments of destabilization and chaos, because and also just complete and total lack of public trust as well.
It's
and
also
so
the royals. They're landed royalty in a lot of these countries too. That's what's distinct about this is the aristocracy component. That these are nobles that can kind of exist from a foregone time, like before World War II when all the monarchies got swapped out, and now these are the individuals that are essentially untouchables that are carrying out these acts. For example, King Albert of Belgium was highly implicated in this whole affair.
Yeah, absolutely. And King Albert, I mean, he has some very interesting connections when it comes down to the Gladio, as far as like tying in Gladio, as well as the fact that Michel Nihul claimed that he had, videos of him, as far as just compromising videos of him sexually abusing young boys.
The Brabant killings, the Gladio attack I kind of referenced earlier, there were multiple people who claimed that was simply, those weren't just random killings. Those were targeted assassinations of individuals who had managed to get a hold of blackmail from this organization. Were intending on using it against the network.
Oh, dude. Michel Lelievre, he's a drug addict and this petty thief, right? He's an accomplice of Marc Dutroux. And it's very interesting, too, because Dutroux's wife, Michelle Martin, she's a former primary school teacher and the mother of his 3 children. And she admitted that in '95, she knew 2 small girls were incarcerated without food or water in a secret dungeon in the cellar of her home that they owned in Charleroi, which that's another thing, because all of his financial interests really, I think, are very much should raise red flags as well. And there was
not even to mention the 25 hair samples found in the dungeon, thus disputing the claim that they were able to starve to death and just no one checked on them. They left them there. There were other people, prominent people, likely coming down there and raping them and slinging them to other prominent people.
Unbelievable.
Exactly. And I actually discovered the fact that, they were potentially they didn't starve to death. They were potentially killed in a snuff film, is basically what was what the claim was. And so it was interesting because the wife, Michelle Martin, she says that she told police, apparently, that she visited the house to feed their dogs while her husband was in jail on car theft charges, but she was too frightened to feed the girls. And months later, Dutroux led police to the emaciated bodies of Julie Lujan and Melissa Russo, who were two 8-year-olds who had been kidnapped more than a year before, and they were buried in the garden of another of Dutroux's homes.
My God, dude.
So, but this accomplice, Michel Lilievre, he's a drug addict and petty thief, and he tells police that soon after his arrest, he tells the police that the girls had been kidnapped to order for someone else. The chief suspect was Jean-Michel Nihoul, a Brussels businessman, pub owner, and familiar face at sex parties. Now, while they had been in prison, Lilievre told the police that Dutroux and Nihoul met frequently in the exercise yard making plans. The judge investigating the case, Jean-Marc Connerat, he believed Nihoul was the brains behind the operation. But as the network began to unravel, Lilievre suddenly stopped cooperating, saying he had been threatened. And then there was this there's this journalist. Her name was Olenka Frankiel, and she's an investigative journalist who goes to Belgium right around this time, and she claims that she met Nihoul in a restaurant in Brussels, and he proclaims, "I am the monster of Belgium," he roared by way of greeting. He is confident he will never come to trial, and that the evidence against him will never be heard by any jury. During the course of the meal, he apparently grabbed her, tickling, and finally pulled her over on him in the restaurant booth until she had to appeal to her colleagues for rescue. And he says he'll never come to court. He said because the information he has about important people in Belgium would bring the government down. The monster of Belgium denies he's a pedophile, but seemed to enjoy his notoriety and demanded 1,000 francs for his story. They declined the offer, but they did need to offer Nihoul a right to reply to the accusations made by Regina Louf, who was a woman at that time. She was 33. I'm not sure how old she is now, but her testimony clearly raised a lot of it became a smoking gun, honestly. But Louf came forward after Judge Connerat made an appeal to victims of pedophiles to tell police what they knew. And so it gets very interesting because it was highly organized. The claims are big business for blackmail, obviously, a lot of money involved. In 96, it gets, honestly, man, it's one of the most disturbing and extraordinary cases that I've ever come across. And when you look at the organizers as well, I mean, it gets very
goes all the way to the Belgian prime minister. I actually kind of want to back it up to the Brabant killings because I think this kind of illustrates an interesting point. If you go to the prime minister, just to back up a little bit, there was this thing called CPIC, which was a political party. It created this Nouvelle de Jeunesse, which was like this publication. From there, that spawned off what was it, the Westland New Post, which was this paramilitary organization, which it ends up carrying out the Brabant killings later. Come to find out, it was started by what was Latinus. I forget his Paul Latinus was his name. This guy was a part of the Sûreté from the start. He was, an informant of some sort, which the Sûreté was the Belgian intelligence. So this individual from the start, the founder of this entity, this essentially a Gladio entity carrying out false flag attacks in the future, was from the jump was part of Belgium intelligence. Not only that, later he then claims his mother claims that he was hired by DIA, which is a United States intelligence agency, and that he directly worked for Alexander Haig, which is like, so that is where you get all the way to the tippy top, where you get to like NATO right there. And this is the guy who created the Westland New Post, which is the entity, the paramilitary front, the intelligence front that was carrying out false flag activities in Belgium. And likely in to cover up sexual blackmail.
There is, Ole Demigard always talks about organizations who just travel around and commit false flag operations. Like they show up and that's their job, to create the atmosphere, the situation in which these things happen, which become high impact events. Remember the Area Grande the bombing in England,
Dude,
and
that
then
was
like
Operation Fast and Furious.
Yep, the Fast and Furious guns, baby.
Yeah, that was traced back to Fast and Furious in that operation, which is crazy. That came up when I did the episode on the Las Vegas shooting from 2017, because I think that
They
was
keep
very much
reusing that
tied
fucking place.
Yeah,
It's like involved in like 4 major ops at this point.
Where Vegas?
No, the
Vegas.
Lone Wolf gun store or whatever, which is it keeps getting used in ops. The ops get exposed. It's the same exact place every fucking time.
It's so
But
crazy.
they also do use Vegas because of how much there's a organized crime footprint there, I believe, which is why Paddock was running the gun smuggling operation with a leader of the local organized crime syndicate that was running. Basically, it was for plausible deniability reasons that he was essentially he was the cutout for the intelligence apparatus that was in play as far as conducting the operation itself. And that was all exposed whenever Silkway Airlines, the Paddock-owned airline, this was flying in, smuggling weapons into O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. And Stephen Paddock himself went to meet one of the planes to accept them in through customs. And it's crazy to me. I forget the name of the forget if he was a Russian mafia a mob member. I can't remember now who his name. I can pull up the notes in a moment. But honestly, I think the most important point is just the fact that they typically utilize Vegas as a. I think even Ted Gunderson claimed that one of the areas where children were being auctioned in the context of the Finders, I believe is what it was. Whenever that came up, Ted Gunderson, because of course Ted Gunderson describes the Finders as a CIA front, right? Established in the 1960s. I think that's proven actually through Athena Veronis, who I think was the fixer.
Don't forget about the Air America connection, because that ties it right back into our that connects it right back into our overarching thesis here, baby. Go ahead.
It really does prove out that there's honestly, man, it seems as if there's an international private intelligence network that has been strategically put into place. And I think that this all stems from Gladio, from the aftermath of World War II, setting up the Nazi rat lines strategically.
You're so right, dude. You're so
man,
right.
all of this, it's so strange because whenever this was set up, it very much proves that, oh, by the way, oh my God, I can't forget this, because I discovered earlier that apparently, my God, man, there's like all of these rogues, operatives that were a part of setting up the Gladio network, the stay behind networks. But there's a chronology of events that was basically outlined in Operation Gladio, the book by Paul Williams, and it's actually. I believe the title was Operation Gladio: The Unholy Alliance Between the Vatican, the CIA, and the Mafia. And I think there couldn't be a better example of how this was structured, right? And I think that also it brings perfectly into the conversation the aspect of the secret societies as far as
P2 lodges.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, like to go back to a point you just brought up, this kind of like secret intelligence organization. I think like Mossad, CIA, MI6, they're just like storefronts. And like in reality, they all work together to protect the interests of the predator class.
Exactly. I think that these people, they don't recognize international borders, national borders, right? They, generally speaking, man, in terms of intelligence and covert intelligence, especially, it's really one whole perverse network that leads into the other. And I think that's very much, I mean, even Epstein himself kind of proves that out, because at one point he'd even claimed that he worked for the CIA. I think Robert Maxwell was a layered operative who worked not only for Mossad, but also CIA and Russian intelligence. I think they all kind of have like dual loyalties. And military intelligence is always involved with these various networks. It's interesting as hell because they all blend together as well. You have MK Ultra, right? You have the drug running aspect of it all, human trafficking, pedophilia, child pornography, prostitution, and all of them kind of coalesce to create this one single enterprise. When as far as these networks are concerned, it's never limited to just distributing child pornography. They're going to also distribute snuff films.
It only makes sense. You got to think, if you already have this op that's carrying out, false flag attacks, and let's say you need sexual blackmail in order to insulate this network, protect them from, information attacks from the outside. It only makes sense. You already have people carrying out awful acts, murdering people and stuff. Wouldn't it make sense to also have them, do the other awful acts? Wouldn't it also make sense to now create some sort of, network through which you can, you can transport your drugs, your humans, your all different things, and it becomes this layered op to where it's not really. This is what Gladio is. It's this whole network of, people carrying out these awful things, people super in the clique. This is whatever it is, the people that sit above us in shadow, that's what this is. It gets really dark, especially when
it gets really dark because as we get more and more liberal and we accept certain things, you have to get darker and darker to control this stuff, and then it gets into God, fallen angels, Kronos, Black Cube, Saturn worship, child sacrifice, the story of Kronos, all that stuff.
This all came up. Yeah, all of that comes up in the context of the Kincora scandal and in regard to the murder of Brian McDermott, I believe was the name of the boy. But it very much brings into light the reasons behind, at least the potential reasons behind the ritualistic purposes of blood sacrifice. But more than that, unfortunately, child sacrifice. But it typically involves aspects of trauma-based mind control, which I find very interesting as well, because, it tends to come up so very often in context to not only Kincora, but also the Finders, also Dutroux, also the Presidio.
You gotta think of perfectly that blends into cults and the like, so we gotta think MK Ultra at one point, hanging out in the universities, doing this type of research, and at some point, we have the church committee, and we're not doing MK Ultra anymore, and now we have all this string of cults. Shortly after, we get this string of serial killers. I don't know. I think maybe there's some parallel. There's maybe some conclusions or implications to be drawn.
I think you're totally right. I think when we get into like Martin Bormann and how he creates this kind of network, which establishes kind of how like corporations operate, you get into the Bilderberg Group, which is basically where Nazis and the Western banking cabal came to basically work on how can we work together while we secretly try to fuck each other over. Bilderberg Group comes from Nazis. And so you're telling me this Gladio stuff, that's probably just straight up Nazi shit right there.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, and that's why it ties directly in with Colonia Dignidad, torture colony.
Dude, I got to tell you something I found out yesterday, Austin, and this ties in perfectly into this. I found out yesterday that, this ties into the whole cults, MK Ultra connection here that I was kind of making. Jonestown, apparently the land upon which it was at in Guyana, the 2 years prior, literally right before they took over the land, like it was owned by the government, and it was being trained for it was used for Operation Shalom, where they took black Green Beret soldiers and trained them in what I don't know particularly. One of those individuals that was trained there within the 2 years prior to the Jonestown, debacle in Guyana on that very same land was Colton Westbrook, the spook that ended up being the person who was running the Symbionese Liberation Army, that was known for Patty Hearst and all that. That's he was being trained right before then, and then in MK Ultra op, Jonestown goes off right then. I just was talking about false memory syndrome yesterday, and that is like, holy shit, no fucking way. Austin's gonna cream his pants.
Hold on.
Yeah, we threw a lot at you.
Guys, pump the brakes. Hold that. The Sudanese, was it
Symbionese Liberation Army?
Okay, so where did Jonestown happen? What is the country?
Guyana.
Guyana. Guyana used this territory.
But it was on the border of Argentina as well, I believe.
Which is Nazi stuff right there.
Yep.
They were training black soldiers.
Weren't there rat lines there too, Austin? I believe you've dug into that before. They use it for rat lines before that, I believe. Maybe I might be wrong.
Was, like what is interesting is that whenever if you remember,
it just keeps getting used for spooky shit. But go on.
Oh my God, man! Like I'm telling you, man, it becomes very strange because it basically it proves out that the way that Jim Jones acquired the land itself is very interesting as well, because it was the temple established offices in Georgetown, the capital of Guyana, and conducted numerous meetings with the Prime Minister, Forbes Burnham, and other Guyanese officials. In 1974 is when the first group of People's Temple members arrived in this remote location in Guyana. It was December of 74. And that's when they started operating the People's Temple Agricultural Project there that would soon become Jonestown. But in 76, Temple member Michael Proxt requested that Guyana's Prime Minister Forbes Burnham receives Jones as a foreign dignitary, along with other high-ranking U.S. officials.
Whoa!
Yeah. And by the way, Jim Jones, he had effectively taken over the welfare financial center in Mendocino County, which, by the way, right near Fort Bragg, which always tends to come up in regards to this because of the psychological warfare center, the JFK Psychological Warfare Center.
And he had his own kill squads. He literally had his own kill squads.
The Red Brigade
to tie it back into Gladio. He literally had his kill squads there.
Who?
But I think they Jim Jones.
Jones had a kill squad?
Yeah, he had like a tiered hierarchy. Essentially had like all the minorities and the poors that were like the members of the cult. And he had these like guys who were all spooks and former military and whatever that were his Red Guard, you know?
But he was allegedly inspired by William Branham. And this ties directly into Paul Schaefer's vision for Colonia Dignidad as well. And the same exact thing happened there as far as the investigators who went in, finally breached, you know, the fenced-in, razor-wired perimeter of Colonia Dignidad in Chile. They go in there, and one of the primary, investigators claimed that these people looked entirely mind-controlled, as if they were zombies, right? And so it's very interesting because that was a similar thing happened in Guyana as far as...
Yeah, they were giving daily medication to these guys. Yeah. They were zonking them the fuck out.
And was it you guys that came on that said that you felt... like the people who went to Jonestown were somewhat leftovers from these MK Ultra projects.
Oh yeah,
that they were trying to basically just eliminate, funnel them into there, and then they clean up their tracks.
Well, Austin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the quick and short of it is that essentially around the time that it was like essentially it was getting ready to go live, if you catch my drift, things were about to pop off. For some reason, there was kind of a push for some of the people stateside to get them over, and some of them, I think it was successful to get them to Guyana. These were ones, there were certain individuals, Austin, I know you dug into this more, so I know you know what I'm getting at. There were certain individuals that, looked like they were trying to, essentially tie up loose ends there with that up.
Yeah, that was, I know Bo Gritz, right, who was, he's tied into a lot of these, like, if you remember when I came on to talk about Ruby Ridge, right, he was Colonel Gritz, Bo Gritz was the individual who went to attempt to have a conversation because he's a former Green Beret. He was going to have a conversation with Randy Weaver and attempt to talk him down and remove him from the property before they just massacred the rest of the family. And but James Gordon Gritz was his name, and he was a former U.S. Army Special Forces officer and worked in the office of the Secretary of Defense. And following his formal retirement at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in 1979, he also happened to train the Afghan Mujahideen in America on behalf of the government.
In America.
So that goes to point out the fact that we have domestic black sites that none of us are read in on or acknowledging or aware of in general. And this has been a policy of, the covert, intelligence apparatus for as long as they've been in existence. And this is the other thing that I was going to point out, that the timing of the CIA being formed in the first fucking place seemed like, and it was put into these terms specifically, that potentially the CIA was formed to manage Gladio. I swear to God that this was legitimately how this was put forward, especially considering Alan Dulles, what the fuck's the other one? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the point being is that they are consistently utilizing this playbook, all right? And it's a recycled tactic. And what they do is they have these clandestine black sites, which I think I even mentioned on whatever this is the other day, as far as the connection to the JFK assassination and how JFK and RFK discovered upon taking office, like shortly after
the Cuban training camps.
Yeah, that they had these black sites that were essentially they were functioning as domestic training camps for these Cuban exiles, right? And that I'm sure it wasn't only limited to Cuban exiles, because
now think about that concept, and we tie it back to what we just talked about with Operation Shalom, which was being perpetrated on a black site, which I think we could probably call it a black site, where Jonestown was carried out a couple years later.
Exactly.
Colton Westbrook was there receiving training of some sort, and then it just so happens shortly after that, I forget the specific time when the SLA stuff happens, but SLA, the Symbionese Liberation Army, was a left-wing group in America. What was it? Austin, you probably know the dates better than I would, but it was in the 80s, I think, right?
70s.
70s, okay. And that was essentially, there was this well-to-do lady, Patty Hearst. She was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army group, this paramilitary group is what they frame themselves at. When you look into them, it looks very fishy. It looks like a most frontiest of fronts that ever fronted. Just kind of looks like a group. Yeah, like not real. Like this essentially.
What do you think the purpose of that was?
Whatever Colton Westbrook was being trained for. Now, this guy Colton Westbrook was also someone who was part of Operation Phoenix, which was essentially kill squads in Vietnam. Essentially the same exact Gladio in Vietnam.
He was brought back to set up the pipeline to Berkeley.
Yep.
UC Berkeley, the campus.
And he comes and he's working
where fucking
in Berkeley.
Patty Hearst was tied up in the pipeline, going to the institution where Donald Cinque de Vries happened to be, housed. Where guess what? Oh, they just so happened to be, practicing this well-established operation called behavioral modification research, where they were conducting at this facility.
Yeah, and they had Patty Hearst. You pay attention; it's literally brainwashing being perpetrated to the public. That's the big thing about her. She got taken, kidnapped. They were fucking with her. And you can watch the process of her being brainwashed throughout it. So,
man. It is crazy. And by the way, the seven-headed SLA Hydra Light Cobra symbol that was used as the logo and featured in the group's publication that were then distributed around campus in support of the SLA after Tanya the Revolutionary made her full transition into this new formed personality that was not at all who she was prior to being essentially like they were operating on MK Ultra techniques as far as what they were doing to her. They were locking her into a closet, sexually abusing her, but keeping her in the dark. They would provide her a flashlight when they would give her specific documents to read that were like essentially mind control manuals, which is very interesting. So,
and the person who did this was trained on the same exact black site within a couple years prior to Jonestown. So
no, hold on.
So crazy, man.
So who is this other chick you're talking about?
Patty Hearst is Tanya the Revolutionary. She made this transition.
Yes.
Yeah, it was while she was abducted.
She got DID'd in real time. Dissociative identity disorder.
She got DID'd in real time, exactly. Yep. Dissociative identity disorder, and they basically implemented an alter personality. And if you go back to Dutroux and the X dossier, you realize that that's what they do. They implement all of these different alternate personalities. That's what dissociative identity disorder is. It's a product of multiple of MID, right? Multiple identity
One example I like to use that displays this, and it is a little crude, but I think it kind of because I think if you wrap your head around it or try to, you can kind of understand. Now, Regina Loof, which character we've talked about a lot, the Dutroux affair, as Austin was saying, when she started exhibiting alternate personalities, her pimp groomed those personalities. And eventually she got to a point where she had multiple, one of which, the one I frequently bring up, is one I believe it's called like the whore. And so that would be like the slutty personality. And then she had ones that was more of like a childlike personality where like, and even then the pimp would almost take on like a father-like personality. So it almost makes you think like, you know, if you think of it in generational terms, now what happens with this personality that's the whore? What happens 10, 15 years in the line? Is this person that's now a pimp or a procurer in some sort of thing, and now they're hurt people? Like I think it's a kind of a way to wrap your head around how DID works, brainwashing people for roles, and then what roles do they take on later. It's kind of sick and twisted to think about, but I mean, if you are a child, we all need love. If you're put in a situation like that, I mean, you kind of are almost, forced to create separate entities and somehow be able to fragment those two things out. Because how do you have someone that's supposed to be taking care of you do this to you? And, how are you supposed to then believe that they love you at the same time? And on the flip side, how are you supposed to do that to someone and also be able to, because, I mean, it goes both ways for humans, that we need to give love and receive love. So, I mean, the perpetrators, the people victimizing them likely were people that were in some sort of network like this when they were younger too. So it's dark stuff.
It was her grandma
that
brought her into this fucking network
and
facilitated the abuse from the beginning, which is so often the case. Where it also that happened within the context of the Concora scandal and the Brian McDermott ritualistic.
I think there was a famous 60 Minutes story about a girl who accused her grandmother of basically selling her into sex slavery. And like nobody believed her. And then it turned out to be totally true. She said all this stuff. She broke it all down. And the grandma was arrested. It's like unbelievable. It's like
it's
one of those
like the False
stories
Memory
on
Syndrome
like
Foundation.
Australia.
Sorry,
it's like 60 Minutes Australia does great work. Like what the United States 60 Minutes used to do. The Australian one, they'll do a story on child sex trafficking in a heartbeat. Ours will be like, it's not real. Trust us. We're 60 Minutes. They're so full of shit, dude. But like they did a story about her grandma. This girl said, my grandma was pimping me out to this. She wouldn't let me see where I was going. She'd pimp me out. Like, dude.
My God.
Awful.
It reminds me of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation that Jose had recently brought up, because guess what? I mean, the parents that created the foundation were legitimately being accused by their daughter of sexually abusing her. Right.
And like every spook that shows up on the foundation is like a super clicked up MK Ultra spook.
MK Ultra and psychological operations as well. But to the point you made about Regina Louf, X1, man, she suffered from multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, and she told how many of her alters or alternative personalities still had the same age as when they were created, or how her handwriting differed depending on which alter was active.
Wow.
As is obvious from her background of extreme abuse, these symptoms started at an early age, and interestingly, her pimp, as Jose said, not only wasn't surprised when he first encountered X1's alters, he actually cultivated them. So DID was created in X1 because of her background of extreme abuse. But what did this abuse actually involve? First, there was the psychological aspect. X1 never received any support or love from her parents, her grandmother, Tony, her primary abuser, or any of her other abusers, especially Tony and the grandmother, who acted as her pimps, indoctrinated X1 with the belief that she was a nobody, that besides Tony, nobody cared about a little whore like her, that she was too stupid to become anything else than a prostitute, and that love is something you never get for free. Furthermore, X1 was blamed for just about anything that happened to her, to other children in the network, to her pets, or even to those who abused her. For example, if X1 had given fellatio to her pimp, which wasn't satisfying enough, he would beat her up, yelling at her that she was worthless.
Yeah, I've had to stop covering this on my show a few times. Just stop and take a breather, because it's dark stuff. That's just
more affected in my life.
I'm not even
and
kidding,
after
dude.
I read the X dossier.
It's like it's just like
serious.
you listen to this stuff and you're just like, there's just such a pushback from people, not because they don't necessarily believe, but they just can't come to grips with that there are apex predators around us, and they can't They can't come to grips with it. It's unless it happens right to their kid, they get nothing involved. This fucking town, I live in LA, this fucking comedy scene, all turn their head. They're all ready to it's like so crazy if you say the comedy scene. Like if you're a good looking white guy, they have no problems with taking you out with just an accusation, no fucking evidence. But anybody else, dude, good luck. Dude, good luck. God, everything is lip service. And there's fucking hunters everywhere. It's so sad. Like, it's so sad. It's just like, I can't even begin to think about it because it gets me so sad. Like, foster kids, man. Will you listen to Jared from Subway? What do you say?
Yeah, man, that reminds me a lot of like the Finders Cult stuff. I think you got a little bit sidetracked, Austin, but I figured I'd rein you back in because I believe Air America, that ties it into drug trafficking, if I recall correctly, because it was Air America that was used for a shitload of the drug trafficking through Mena, Arkansas and the like. But yet at the same time, this is also, was it Miriam Petty? Was clicked up the one who ran the Finders Cult, which it looks like this was there's all sorts of documents that came out that looked like it was a CIA covered up it looked like there was something the CIA had to cover up. I mean, I know, very reminiscent of kind of like a certain case in the news lately. Essentially was an entity that seemed to be methodically kidnapping children and getting them to individuals. There was files that were found. I'll pass it off to Austin because I know you know all the details here, but there were files found on essentially the systemization of how they would procure children all across the world. There were files for different countries. And then, obviously this thing ends up being covered up because the CIA is implicated in some way. So, I mean, you can kind of spin your wheels from there. But yeah, I'll pass it off to you, bud.
Man, yeah, it basically on the premises of the Finders properties in DC that the U.S. Customs Office, they held a raid and they brought in U.S. Customs agent Ramon J. Martinez, right? And he went in and actually carried out this raid with various members of the local investigation team, basically from the DC Metropolitan Police. But it's very interesting because what they find at the property becomes extremely disturbing, right? Because we're talking, it seems like blood rituals and sexual orgies involving children were definitely involved, as well as unsolved murders, completely tied into the organization itself. But yeah, so
didn't one of the children have like essentially like a prolapsed anus or something along with? I know this is awfully awful to say, but like there was forensic evidence that was showing that these children were being molested. The children that were found with the initial individuals. Yeah,
man, I'm telling you, man. Like when they were originally arrested in Tallahassee in '87, I think is when it was. But when they were arrested in Tallahassee, they had direct communication instantly to the organization because everyone in DC just shit their pants and the cover-up began to take place. And unmarked white vans started showing up at the Finders properties and at the warehouse specifically, seeing men leaving and piling boxes into the vans. And so very much they were tipped off and they were moving most of, I would think, the most evidence with any real substance. And so it's very interesting though, because it was Customs Agent Martinez who stood by while this raid was being conducted on the W Street apartments and then the Finders warehouse as well. And during the execution of the warrant at the W Street apartments, Ramon J. Martinez was able to observe and access the entire building, seeing large quantities of children's clothing and toys. The clothing consisted of diapers and clothes in the toddler to preschool range. No children were found on the premises. There were several subjects on the premises. Only one was deemed to be connected with the Finders. The rest were renting living space from the individual. This guy's name was Stuart Miles Silverstone. And by the way, these individuals just so happened to have direct connections to the Jesuit order in Georgetown University, which is very interesting as well, because they were tied into a babysitting service that was attempting to procure children. So there you go. This is a part of what the Finders would do. Their playbook was infiltrate and embed themselves into these child care avenues, right, where they would just gain more access to these vulnerable children.
What was her name that was busted in Haiti? Got tried, found.
Silsby.
Yeah, she's in the. She's literally working for Florida's.
Amber Alert.
Amber Alert, and these. Listen, I'm not a Tate Brothers guy, and if they were involved in dark shit because they do have CIA connections, then fuck them, okay? Yep. But the notion that this guy, that this prosecutor's going after the Tate Brothers when he didn't do jack shit with Epstein or any of that stuff is just disgusting. And this is where it's getting to, dude. The population is becoming way more savvy than the elites can handle. And we're starting to see the flaws in what they're doing and the hypocrisy. And people are waking up to it because it's absolute bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I think I've been recently reeling over True Detective, and I think that the end of that show kind of really puts it well, like does justice for this concept here. The idea that, two things. For one, the idea of not looking away or not subjecting yourself to complacency. I think people are waking up to this stuff, and I think people are realizing that this is all off their back. You were literally fleeced for this to happen. Like the powers above you, this is all off of your back. This is all off of your dime. This is extracted from your energy. Literally, this at its root, Gladio is strategy of tension. The idea of problem, reaction, solution, or whatever. The idea that we're trying to evoke a reaction from you. They are literally psychic vampires, and vampires, even in the most literal sense, up into including your money, your energy, your everything, and all of this is so that they can rape your children and do it with a smile on their face. And I don't know, there's not much more despicable in the world. Cernovich, go look it up. The dude literally wrote an article about sucking off a tranny back in the day.
Yeah. So he's interesting because, he was being critical of Israel for a brief moment. You saw him doing that. But it's very interesting.
Well, he always seats it in I'm just being a rational Zionist here, and I'm willing to interact with because he will always frame it in a way of every time I've seen him say anything that's slightly, it's more of I can see where you're coming from, and I'll have a reasonable conversation with you. That's the framing he usually has, although he ultimately usually takes kind of the Israel position. He's just not a screeching faggot about it.
And all these guys have to understand eventually they're just going to come for them too. I mean, eventually, once they establish the trade route that is Israel, they'll eventually clean out all these other motherfuckers too. All these brown coat fucking sellouts. They'll all get taken. Eventually, they just eat their own. It's just
Cerno's supposedly the guy who's looked the most into. He's always framed by the influencers out there. If he's the guy who's looked into the most, he'll the guy who'll deflect away from Assad accusations and act like, oh well, we don't really know. And you're like, dude, you're supposedly the guy who looked into it the most. You know, you've got enough data points to at least come to a reasonable conclusion that hey, they're pretty damn involved.
It's like we said last episode, dude. It's not hate, it's criticism. You're labeling it as hate. It's criticism. Now, is there hate? Of course. Of course there is. It's the internet. Everyone gets hate. But really what you're upset about is criticism. What they're getting you to do to fight their fights for them is to stop criticism of the last firewall to the true highest levels of power, which is to make it anti-Semitism. Right? I mean, that's really what it is. And it goes beyond Jews. It just gets to this, again, this predator class that they want you to believe is Jews. I'm not saying, and listen, before you guys start going nuts on me, I'm not saying there's no Jews. There's a ton of Jews involved. But it's as we go through it, there's more and more people involved than just one group of people.
As I was kind of implying when we were talking about secret societies, I mean, most, unless you dug into this, wouldn't really get the implications there. I was kind of heavily implying there's some sort of Catholic influence going on here with Opus Dei. You got Knights of Malta. You look at all the individuals around Trump, and you look at the individuals that hang around these blackmail networks. A lot of them are Opus Dei. I mean, the Detroit network, the fingerprints of Opus Dei was so heavy-handed, it was ridiculous. Almost every one of those.
When you talk about Georgetown, you talked about Jonestown. That's next to Georgetown. Georgetown is a Jesuit. The University of Georgetown, Jesuit.
And that operation was arranged through Georgetown, obviously, by the leading government officials at the time who were installed by the intelligence community. But with Cernovich, it's ridiculous because he claims that Alan Dershowitz was his inspiration to go to law school, and he also created a film, right, as executive producer, and also was legitimately filming it himself. And Cernovich, no, this documentary was starring none other than Alan Dershowitz as well. So you can look all of that up, and it's very clear and obvious that he's compromised by the very network, in place. But as far as on the front of the secret society aspect, connecting into Gladio, I think it's very important to have that conversation at least briefly. But what I think is the most interesting right now is that we had mentioned Roy Cohn, and I just wanted to kind of reinforce that narrative because when I covered The Ultimate Evil, which is really just an episode dedicated to the David Berkowitz murders being entirely, a part of this wider network that were following this ideology of a organized cult, so a cult organization known as the Process Church of the Final Judgment, right? But it's interesting because according to Berkowitz, the Process Church was providing children for sex at parties held by wealthy people in Westchester, Manhattan, Connecticut, and Long Island. Berkowitz informed Maury Terry, the author of The Ultimate Evil, that one of these parties were held at Roy Cohn's house in Connecticut.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Additionally, two further witnesses maintained that occasionally present at these parties were a Yonkers judge, at least two Westchester County politicians, a high-ranking New York State politician, a celebrated but later murdered physician, a Nobel Prize-winning doctor, and two aides to then mayor of New York City, Abraham Beame. So, and that, I think, is something that's worth mentioning. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
especially
we've been saying this forever.
Yeah,
with the left
absolutely.
in particular. Conformity. Conformity is the initiation into just the structure. Then pedophilia is the initiation to the highest levels of power. That, like, is either it's like a gang jumping. It's like you got to murder someone to get in a gang. You got to rape a kid to get to this highest level.
There's no better contractual agreement or contractual offer you can put on the table that will seal your word more than a dark contract with the blood of a child. I mean, absolutely.
I mean, it's very interesting because that came up in the context of Concora as well, as far as the murder of, Brian McDermott and the reason that he committed this blood ritual sacrifice. And it kind of like draws into as far as like the purpose behind the sacrifice. It really is very interesting, and it ties into the Royal Black Institute. It's basically this Freemasonic Brotherhood that was entirely responsible for the Orange Order, which was a Protestant fraternal order and secret society based in Northern Ireland with deep ties to the Black Preceptory or Royal Black Institution and the Freemasonic Brotherhood. And so the occult history of Ireland is very interesting, and all these alpha lodges of British Freemasonry essentially executed using these revolutionaries. Basically they had an entire operation called Operation Clockwork Orange, and it was really to destabilize.
And when did that come out?
This was all like Operation Clockwork Orange was forget his name is Colin Wallace, I believe. He's the man who knew too much, and he's an MI6 agent, I believe.
But when did that come out?
Kincora?
No, when did Operation Clockwork Orange? When was that operation running?
It was in the 80s. Yeah. So it was like late 70s, early 80s. I'll pull up the actual date. Hold on, let me pull it up.
You know what's so funny about that is like, what came out first, the movie or the movie or the operation?
Yeah, honestly, when did it?
Well, the film came out in the early 70s, like probably 70, 71, something like that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, so Operation Clockwork Orange was a secret British security services project alleged to have involved a right-wing smear campaign against British politicians from 1974 to 75.
And the book was in 62. The book came out in 62, and then the film was 71. Look it up.
Okay. All right. So yeah, it's fresh off the heels of the movie, not too long after.
But that's what they do. That's what they do.
Yeah.
They take a pop culture thing and they use it to shield people looking deeper. And that was one of the things that Kanye said on Rogan, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
like they made the movie Black Panther so nobody would ever hear about the Black Panthers.
My God.
They misspelled Abraxas, and it's in the Dutroux thing. And I think I've told you before, Abraxas is actually a Marvel character too. So I find that interesting that it's almost like covered up a little bit. There is a satanic component to the Dutroux affair earlier, where there was this Abraxas. It also had another term called Celestial Church of Christ, which I thought was interesting. But I think that might be like a process church thing where they kind of worship God and the devil. So that's what that is. They were also looks like they were exploiting Nigerian immigrants there. And this the connection there is Nihul, the person running, allegedly running the Dutroux network. His wife was I believe the finance person of that cult, and so it seems that she was getting in touch with Nigerian immigrants, and they happen to have a young Nigerian immigrant prostitution problem in the area. So a little bit weird that there's this cult helping these supposedly quote unquote helping these people out. Meanwhile, she's the wife of like the most notorious sex trafficker in the country. So
yeah, especially with as far as like when the police investigated this Belgian gang accused of child sexual abuse and murder, that they raided the headquarters of this very same satanic sect, and they were looking for clues in regard to this this paramilitary Belgian gang, which had been accused of child sexual abuse. And so it said that essentially after they raided the headquarters of the Institute, Abraxas is how they pronounce it, I think. And it's really just another version of Abraxas. It's very interesting. You pull it up. It is just another name for Abraxas, but it said 150
chicken
police.
heads, thank God.
Yeah. Exactly. It said 150 police and special investigators raided the headquarters of the Institute of Abraxas in Forches-le-Marche, near the central Belgian city of Charleroi on Saturday night. That was in 96. And the television showed police taking away bags of papers, video cassettes, and a refrigerator. It said they also took away black magic ritual implements and human skulls.
Oh my God.
RTBF said the raid had been prompted by the discovery of an undated letter addressed to someone named Bernard, asking him to remind someone else that a special ceremony was approaching and to remember a special gift. The letter was then signed by Anubis, an ancient Egyptian god, and the assumed name of the high priestess of the Abraxas sect. A Frenchman, Bernard Weinstein, a known accomplice of a gang led by convicted rapist Marc Dutroux, he admitted to, which Dutroux, of course, admitted to burying him alive and murdering him on one of his properties. But Weinstein's body was found alongside those of 8-year-olds Julie Lugin and Melissa Russo in mid-August and buried on a property belonging to Dutroux in the town of Sars-le-Bussier, southwest of Charleroi. But yeah, it gets even crazier than that because the 2 girls abducted in June of 95 had starved to death earlier that year. Dominique Kindermans, the high priestess of the sect of Abraxas, said that to her knowledge, neither Dutroux nor Weinstein had ever been members of or connected with Abraxas. A spokesman for gendarmes, the police force, searching an abandoned mine complex in nearby Jumet, a suburb of Charleroi, refused to comment on any link between the Abraxas raid and their own hunt for a secret hiding place they are convinced Dutroux had in the mine for abducted children. Found during the raid were letters to Dutroux and his murdered accomplice Weinstein, along with additional paperwork linking Dutroux to the satanic cult, even going into detail stating that victims were stripped naked, chased into the woods by dogs, and then subjected to torture and orgies. Another victim of similar abuse, Darren Jeffries, described being taken with a group of children to Rainbow Wood, located in Bath, in the UK. And once there, saints of these cult groups would take part in the ritualized tribute they called the chase, where they would be stripped naked and they would be chased by men and dogs. And apparently once they were captured, they would be tortured, sodomized, and some of the children even died there. The chase is what it was called. Is allegedly a known tribute to the biblical Moloch or child sacrifice.
Oh my God, there it is.
as an owl.
Fucking
The idea
pieces
is that
of
an
shit.
owl doesn't just catch a mouse and eat it. The owl will capture a mouse and then let it go. It gives its prey a sense of freedom before tormenting and killing it. It has since been revealed that Weinstein and Dutroux were not only procuring children for sex, but for satanic ritual abuse. Weinstein and Dutroux stood under High Priestess Anubis of the Satanic Order of Abersacs in southern Belgium, which was later verified through a police investigation that went public. And Dutroux says he abducted girls with police help. He explains that Dutroux's lawyer apparently said during the trial proceedings, "I speak not only as a lawyer, but also as a citizen and father. He was not the only devil." Out of the 6,000 hair samples that were found in the basement cellar where some of the victims were held, 25 unknown DNA profiles were discovered. There were people in that cellar that are not now accused. The prosecution never attempted to match those DNA profiles to people implicated in the case. The girls that survived were mentioning people they had seen on television, prominent politicians, established members of the Catholic clergy. And John Wedger, he's an investigator, former Scotland Yard detective. He claims to have good information on a member of the clergy who was involved in the killings of two of the girls at a party. And it's one of the most fucked up and disturbing things of all time, claiming that he murdered them by impaling them internally on a concrete dildo.
I'll fucking kill everybody, dude.
Wow.
I'll
This
fucking
is the
kill
sadistic
everybody,
level
dude.
of depravity involved in such an enterprise.
Oh my
Right?
God, dude.
Yeah, man. I mean, it gets so much even worse than that.
Yeah, I mean the hunt you were talking about, the same shit they were doing over in North Fox Island, which we can tie that right into serial killers, which ties into Operation Phoenix. Like it almost looks like we were creating these serial killers, then brought them home. So yeah, I mean, what Dean Coral's like kind of the through line there from how you
Spartacus
get from
Network,
the
Odyssey Foundation.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%, man. And there's more than that. The Elm Guest House affair of 1982 implicating these elites in the UK government, but not only the UK government.
It's so
beyond
crazy
that,
to
man.
me. So we have the Oscars, you know, it brings up this woman who was married to Trudeau or whatever his name is, and she goes over there and starts another sex trafficking ring somewhere else, right? And we have the Oscars, and who won Oscar of the Year for male acting? What's his name?
Adrian Brody.
Adrian Brody.
Oh, yeah.
His wife used to be with Henry Weinstein.
Harvey Weinstein.
Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, Harvey Weinstein.
Wow, that's crazy.
And it's just like she's allowed to just go on with her life. Bitch, you don't tell me you didn't know what he was doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, his kids now are Adrian Brody refers to him as his kids now, like Harvey Weinstein's two kids.
It's so gross, dude. It's so gross. And here you are.
He released a statement today. Actually, this is the first time we heard from Harvey Weinstein in a while. Through
What did he say?
He said that he appreciated that his kids were getting the love they deserve. Is what he said.
Like, who gives a fuck, you scumbag? You're all they're all scumbags. That's
No
why you can't
shit.
take any of that shit serious. You're sitting there talking about you get a second break in life. Oh yeah, you're married to a woman who was with a guy who was a rapist. I mean, like, what are you doing? Running like sex trafficking networks, funneling money to Israel. Like, get the fuck out of here with this
No
bullshit.
shit, man. You know what is crazy to me is that in regard to this strategy of tension and Gladio, as far as these stay behind networks being involved with this very concept of abuse, you know, they were utilizing corporate front organizations, right? It's just like Operation Chaos, where they're forming all these various proprietary firms at the time to achieve plausible deniability is one reason, but it's also the corporate fronts. They can then behave in this sort of like
it's a private public CIA, baby.
Exactly. Consider that. It is the perfect example of the public-private partnerships that seem to
It's
kind
almost
of
like when we have these entities, these players out there that are actually in reality government contractors, and they're sold to us as if, oh, they're these amazing businessmen, you know, these great men of stature, the Howard Rourkes of the world. And no, they're literally government employees. They're a public private. They're leaning heavy on the private and hoping you don't pay attention to the public. Meanwhile, these are leeches. I'm speaking of individuals like Elon Musk. Musk, or the Peter Thiels. These are government contractors. Realize what they are. These are parasites. I mean, these are parasites that have learned how to play in both fields, play in both entities. So they may learn some good things from the private market side of things, but at the end of the day, these are people that are sucking off the teat of government, and they sure would love to suck a whole lot more. So I think people need to keep an eye on it. And I think it's a kind of, we're in this time where cuts, and like, sure, I think it's great. I'm a libertarian. I'm all for budget cuts and the like, but keep in mind what's going to happen when the CIA, when they say, oh, we got to cut are they really cutting, or is people, finding ways to leverage, that into private entities, and now they get government contracts. Yeah. And now the problem just keeps perpetuating.
Watch what the devil, the devil, and man, watch what's going to happen. I mean, like, okay, I'm happy. Get rid of the IRS, get rid of the Fed. What's going to replace it?
Exactly. Yeah, that's where you see the pivot taking place, and that's what, as far as the pivot to technocracy, and that's what really I'm most fearful of is this. Of course, you have these, these Peter Thiel acolytes standing tall behind Trump that very much concern me. I've been kind of like drawing these direct lines throughout how this sort of pivot to kind of reshaping various aspects of, like, for example, even public health has been a priority, I think. And this goes into the dystopian biometric measures that are kind of being ushered through with various false flags like the bird flu and then things of that nature. And in reality, it's really this ultimate agenda that's in play here with biotech investors who are attempting to, like BlackRock's vision, right, to achieve this vision of, kind of basically, here's a good example, is that I'm very concerned that someone such as an RFK Jr., who is really kind of like, I bought his book on Fauci. I mean, I read it. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate a lot of what he has exposed throughout that process during COVID. But I'm very concerned about the fact that I think he's potentially compromised by the Epstein network and sexual blackmail. I think that's a legitimate possibility.
What tipped you off there?
Who is?
Brothers.
It's funny, when I was younger, there was a audition I went into, and the casting director, who was the producer, was flaming gay. and I'm just like, oh, dude, this guy's never going to hire me. I'm not, he could tell I'm not one of his tribe.
You didn't try to gate up?
Hand to God, I watched the show. You could not have got a bigger queen to host the show if you tried.
That's hilarious.
It's crazy. So Peter Thiel going around putting his dick in dudes. That's how you got to get into the club. It's like unbelievable.
And he's got a strange, man, his connections to Ambrosia.
He's always sweating. Always.
Oh, yeah. But I'm telling you, he wants to extend his lifespan, and he's like looking into all these things like Ambrosia.
He's just gay Frankenstein. That's all he is.
If you're a demon, why would you want to die? What's going on the other side isn't good. Mm-hmm. That's why they're like, let me live forever.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, of course, he's pursuing adrenochrome, but in some sort of legal fashion, and supporting companies like Ambrosia, which are very obviously, violating certain legalities in that regard. But one last real connection that I wanted to make sure that we drew directly to Gladio was the Wacken Hut Corporation, because I believe, as I had mentioned, these sort of corporate fronts that were being utilized through Gladio. Wacken Hut was one, but so was Permindex, and both of them are very important within this context, especially how they were kind of leveraged and exploited by. Yeah, that's one exactly. But U.S. intelligence were leveraging and exploiting these corporate fronts, not only CIA and U.S. intelligence, but also MI6 and foreign intelligence agencies as well. And so Wacken Hut's so crazy. Man, it's come up. First of all, they were the company who were providing the training on the ground at the black sites in Belgium for the connection there for those paramilitary groups with Dutroux. And so beyond that, during New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison's investigation of the JFK assassination, Wacken Hut performed detective work for Clay Shaw's defense team and was illegally eavesdropping on Jim Garrison's office during that time. And that alone is like one of the craziest connections that I've ever come across, honestly, in that regard. But then you have this connection where you can draw in these Gladio front companies to modern day Gladio. Honestly, that's what it truly seems to be. So you can draw this all the way up to the Cabazon Indian Reservation, which Jose just mentioned, which after 10 years of exploiting the Cabazon Indian Reservation, a few honest sheriff's deputies and grand jurors came together to form an organization called Decency in Government, Inc., and proceeded to file a lawsuit against the Attorney General of California, the California governor, and the director of the FBI for dereliction of duty. Now, keep in mind, this is around the same area as the Jim Jones Fort Bragg, right? So it all seems that it's very much like ground zero for a lot of this, especially considering San Francisco is not far, and knowing the connections with mind control operations and behavioral modification there. But anyway, so and
apex predators, dude. They're all Gavin Newsom, apex predator.
100%.
They're all apex predators, dude.
And we can only hope that Karen Bass, the mayor who just got caught by she got Project Veritas or something.
I mean, dude, they're finally calling for her to step. I cannot believe it's taken this long.
That's insane. Yeah.
And I thought it was dead in the water, dude. Thank God for whatever you want to say about James O'Keefe. Maybe that audio is what actually brings a little bit of justice.
Yeah,
I hope so, man. I really do. But so it's interesting because as these lawsuits were being filed against all these California officials, as well as the director of FBI for dereliction of duty, apparently the reason was by knowingly allowing and facilitating drug trafficking and smuggling operations in the area, specifically Central California.
Yeah.
So you have several Indians claimed that they had been forced to participate in some of these criminal actions by local sheriff's deputies, essentially exploiting them as slave labor to produce certain drugs. Operatives were flying small planes into the area. Think Barry Seal, right? Think Tosh Plumley. These covert operators that are being.
Is this the octopus?
This is the octopus. Yeah. Yeah. So you have a connection to Cabazon Indian Reservation, Danny Castellero's octopus, and Iran-Contra all in one with Gladio. That is what the fuck we have here. So you have
Gladio is the network.
It has to be. It has to be. I mean, it seems like this is the network that was put into place post-World War II, and it's effectively the private intelligence network that we were talking about. It's the
Martin Boardman Brotherhood. Yeah. That's really what it is.
It's like if you're feeling around in the vascular system along the veins, like when you find Gladio is when you find the artery, when you feel that like ba-boom, 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 that is what Gladio is. Like,
so real quick, as I don't want to keep you guys all day, but what is the definition to you of the Gladio system? Say a definition in a sentence or two.
Well, let me. I know I pulled up, really, I think the best book to go read is Operation Gladio by Paul Williams, The Unholy Alliance, because I truly believe that the Vatican, the CIA, and the mob are directly implicated in this network being formed in the first place. But the way it was described in the first chapter of that book, he begins with a quote by Steve Kangas, I believe, and it's from 1994, a timeline of CIA atrocities. And so he says the Association of Responsible Dissent estimates that by 1987, 6 million people had died as a result of CIA covert operations. Damn. Former State Department official William Bloom correctly calls this an American Holocaust. The CIA justifies these actions as part of its war against communism, but most coups do not involve a communist threat. Unlucky nations are targeted for a wide variety of reasons, not only threats to American business interests abroad, but also liberal or even moderate social reforms, political instability, the unwillingness of a leader to carry out Washington's dictates and declarations of neutrality in the Cold War. Indeed, nothing has infuriated CIA directors quite like a nation's desire to stay out of the Cold War. And I just kind of thought that was an interesting way to put it, at the very least. But my favorite way, I think, to kind of describe it is basically the way I began my the way I began my episode on Jonestown, a while, man, it was one of my first episodes, honestly, and I came across the book, The CIA and the Cult of Intelligence. And as I kind of charted before, like if you look at the chronology of how Gladio was implemented, then you discover that essentially, before the CIA is even established, you have in June of 1942, the Vatican Bank is created and then Lucky Luciano is recruited by ONI. And then you have in April of 43, within a year's time, Operation Husky and the Fort Hunt Conference, which is the formation of Gladio itself. And that happened by February of 1945. So this was in action. And then you have James Jesus Angleton and Borghese established the Italian stay-behind units. And then Lucky Luciano hosts the Havana Conference. And then the CIA is established. And that's when heroin comes to Harlem. PCI makes monumental election gains. Vatican receives $65 million in black funds. CIA develops the drug trade with KMT. Operation Mockingbird. Catholic Gladio is established. Lucio Gelli serves as CIA's liaison to Italian military intelligence.
Yep, it's all
nuts,
that, dude. It's all of
nuts.
that. It's the Jesuits. It's the Zionists. It's the communists. It's the Marxists. It's the Freemasons. It's all that is the umbrella in which all of them, the Satanists, all of them work to get under this umbrella of Gladio, which to me bores out from the Nazi regime. And that's why I always say Nazis didn't lose World War II. Germany did. And it was all part of a way to destroy Germany from the inside, which they're still trying to do. Because I'm sorry, guys, watch for this happening. We're already seeing it. What did Howie say the other day on Cash Daddies? That European military companies, their stock is shooting up, right?
Yeah, because of the requirements for joining NATO, right?
But it is foretold in the Bible that the EU will step in to Gaza. I'm telling you, man. I mark my words. El Dorado's been calling this shit forever. And then when I heard that, I go, this fucking fits right into it. And this is why they're destroying. This is why World War I happened. This is why World War II happened. Is they're destroying Germany from the inside because Germany is supposed to lead the pagans against
wait. But here's my question to you about that now as a believer. See, many believers support what's going on over there because they believe it's necessary. These things have to happen for, the Christ's return. So you as a Christian should be in favor of that.
I'm a follower of Christ, but I believe there's and I don't want to lose everybody. I'm here. You believe you. I will support you in what you believe. Okay? But I think there is an invisible hand in a lot of this. That's just
absolutely. And that's why I believe that knowing the ideological framework that you're dealing with, wouldn't you attempt to, as far as like, the manufactured false prophecy is what I believe has been taking place in regard to, misdirecting fundamental believers who have very much embraced, the Christian Zionism in many ways, right? And I think that's a product of many different factors involved, but I think that there was a deliberate operation in place to subvert the ideology of the Christian, right? Of as far as just the Western Christian, right? The Christians in America. It was to utilize this group of ideologues to their advantage. And so, why wouldn't you manufacture what seems as if a naturally occurring, prophecy, divine prophecy in place? But in reality, you've manufactured this false prophecy in order to kind of bring into the fold this very group of individuals, who subscribe to this ideology and are very vulnerable to this sort of deception, and mind manipulation, that they won't quite see that coming. And so they'll view it as, well, this is what I've been prepared for. I've been primed for this to occur. And so therefore, what I believe is true. And it's reinforcing their ideology, on the way to complete and total genocide. And so it's like you will justify the genocide if you've been convinced of the ideological circumstances involved and the ethical justifications in place, which clearly these mind manipulators are consistently trying to misdirect people
at every
and-
moment,
and-
dude. And
at every
you know,
moment.
it's like Kurt Metzger said a long time ago, man. There are things that he thinks is in the Bible. Johnny, as a believer, would you say it is possible that parts of the Bible could have been manipulated from outside?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
But I don't think that.
So, I mean, okay.
There was a pope that legitimately, it's legitimately been noted, as far as I forget which pope it was, that effectively attempted to manipulate the scripture itself.
I just find it so weird, dude, that God created people and then God creates this that you should kill these people. I'm sorry. I'm just, that's just, I'm
It's
not,
funny, though, the Old
I'm not
Testament-
telling anybody how to live their life. I am a follower of Christ, the teachings of Christ. I just find it weird that some people are God's chosen people and other people are just meant to be slaughtered. It's weird to me.
Yeah, Jesus never said those things.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, anyways, I want to end on this. This has been an excellent episode. It got very dark,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
this is what you come for, right? I mean, you just got to understand what you're up against. I mean, shock. I've learned so much today. And really is, what is the power structure of the world? And it's like, it's Operation Gladio. That's it. What is it? It's Operation Gladio. It is most likely a Nazi created apparatus that spider webs into almost everything. It is shown as it is presented as almost like an anti-communist movement, but in reality, it is doing everything you hate: arms dealing, murder, child sex trafficking, killing of children, blackmail, all that. That is what it really, like, how many times we see in like Hollywood or entertainment or even politics, someone is presented to us as a fucking just a beam of light. In reality, they are dark, nasty people. Like Jerry Seinfeld, right? I mean, when Jerry Seinfeld was on television, you're like, oh, dude, he's just a clean comic who's just a regular guy. It turns out he's a scumbag who fucks married women, and he fucking is like fine with just absolutely.
I love that you're just saying that now. One time that was the thing you were like, I heard something.
Well, you know, his take on Palestinians, he can go fuck himself.
That's great. Good.
Yeah,
Larry
real quick,
David
I did
all
want
day.
to.
Team Larry David all day. And
You
even
did-
Larry David probably has some Zionist views, but at the end,
Oh, dude, no, he's big time.
yeah, of course. But I would take him 1,000 times. Like the fact that Jerry Seinfeld is the actor who's made the most money in his life is like just a sign that we live in a false reality.
Is that real?
Yeah, 100%.
That's
Right.
real? He's made the most money?
He's made more money than everybody else. I don't know how he's made more money than
What
Larry
the
David,
fuck?
who's had 2 successful shows.
Well, yeah, Seinfeld, just the syndication there. He was one of the last guys to really get that syndication. It was like him
Yeah,
and
but
Ray Romano.
how
after
does
that.
Larry David not get that exact same
Well,
money?
remember, he left. Larry David, he wasn't there for the whole run.
I didn't
Seinfeld,
know that.
yeah.
Anyways, guys, great
know
show.
that
Did
either,
we miss
actually.
anything, or can we wrap it up? I don't want to
I
keep
did,
you all day.
I did want to answer your question about how to lay it out. I think I have a quick way to kind of understand
Okay,
Gladio.
let's
I
hear
think
it.
it's an untouchable, top level, elite military is probably the best way to understand it. Like, so this is the secret military that we don't see, the one that's concealed from you. That's going on behind the scenes. That is what we're dealing with there. And obviously there's a hierarchy, as there is in any military, and the higher up you get there, the more implicated they are in the network. But you know, this is essentially the kind of phantom little fingers you see out there of our elites military that play around in shadows.
Man, my final thoughts are basically that I had mentioned the Cabazon connection to Wacken Hut, and how Wacken Hut was working for, during the Clay Shaw's defense team during the JFK assassination. Man, it's so much worse than that, because not only were they exploiting Cabazon in the 90s and late 80s for Iran-Contra, but I mean, you consider like how the immigration crisis is being framed, in America. It's interesting to me because if you watch Cartel Land and And you kind of understand the dynamic between the intelligence community kind of utilizing the cartels to manufacture amphetamines, or even just to facilitate and distribute Chinese fentanyl through the border. I mean, it's definitely been an operation that has been triggered by U.S. intelligence and benefited from as well, because that's how they kind of finance a lot of these black budget operations. If we didn't learn anything from Iran-Contra, then what did we learn? And so the last things that I really wanted to mention was just to finally make this final connection between, I had mentioned last episode earlier in the month, or in February, that we had the conversation about Omar Mateen and the Post Nightclub Network, and briefly how this is tied into Operation Gladio, and really brings into the modern day as far as like the representation and example of how they kind of conduct these paramilitary, well, really destabilization operations domestically within the U.S. And that comes in the form of Wacken Hut still to this day, because apparently beyond exploiting these Indians at Cabazon Indian Reservation for slave labor to produce these drugs, they were also, obviously operatives like Barry Seal and Tosh Plumley were flying in the area as far as smuggling in drugs from Latin America. And at the time, part of it was cocaine being grown in Peru. It was then processed in Colombia and was subsequently distributed out of Costa Rica. And they had been flying in Mexican nationals, so illegal Mexican nationals, to produce and cook meth on the reservation in California. And so you have Sherry Seymour, who wrote an amazing book. It's escaping me the name of her book right now. The Final Circle, The Last Circle, something like that. And she traced all this back to an organization in Fresno called The Company, which was comprised of about 300 former military personnel and law enforcement officers. They had been importing billions of dollars of narcotics from Latin America. They owned ships and airplanes. They were performing mercenary operations and gun running. All of this was published in the San Francisco Chronicle in 82 to 83. There had also been a joint venture between the Cabazon Indian Reservation and Wacken Hut Security Corporation to develop esoteric weapons like the rail gun, and even included biological warfare. The Wacken Hut Corporation, apparently it's like they're really exploiting the legalities behind what an Indian reservation is, without the kind of the federal government's purview involved, sort of, in a way. And so the Wacken Hut Corporation was originally founded in 1954 in Coral Gables, Florida, by George Wacken Hut and 3 partners, all former FBI agents. In 1983, Wacken Hut's 3-year, $81 million contract at the Savannah River Nuclear Weapons Facility in South Carolina was the largest paramilitary security contract ever awarded by the U.S. government. Wacken Hut outbid 18 other bidders to win the contract and brought in 460 uniformed security personnel and 50 administrative support personnel as part of just this single contract. Now, here's where it connects to Omar Mateen. In 2002, the company was acquired for $570 million by Danish corporation group 4Falk. Itself then merged to form the company G4S in 2004. By 2010, G4S Wacken Hut changed its name to G4S Secure Solutions. Its America's region headquarters was in Jupiter, Florida. And on June 12th, 2016, Omar Mateen, who worked at G4S from 2007 until his death, committed one of the largest mass shootings in United States history. And apparently Mateen's employment as an armed guard helped facilitate his access to the firearms. And these firearms refresher courses that he was taking each 4 years at G4S, the company's inability to detect prior warning signals, of course, brought it under widespread scrutiny during that time. And it was the videotape of Mateen that surfaced in 2010 was of him working security for G4S at a site related to the BP oil spill. And the claim had been made that Mateen had a family connection to Al-Qaeda and had said that he was a member of Hezbollah. And that claim happened to originate from his co-workers at G4S Wacken Hut. So this is apparently when the county sheriff's office called in the FBI. And according to reports from the Miami Herald and the New York Times, when G4S became aware that the FBI was investigating Mateen, they did not dismiss Mateen, but transferred him to the South Guardhouse of the PGA Village, a gated community in Palm Beach County. And this is when FBI Director James Comey would later repeat the claims allegedly made by Mateen's basically military contractors, workers at G4S. And Mateen had made statements to his co-workers, allegedly, that were inflammatory and contradictory, claiming a family connection to al-Qaeda, and said he was a member of Hezbollah, a bitter enemy of the Islamic State. And James Comey said he hoped law enforcement would raid his apartment and assault his wife and child so he could martyr himself. Those were the words of James Comey. So the whole point being, this directly implicates the very same corporate front organization that was had been designed to run plausible deniability for the CIA's Gladio operation, and again ties perfectly into not only Dutroux but JFK, but the
and you
octopus
say
as
Fort
well,
Braggs, bro. I mean, Broward County is right there when it comes to psyops, dude. Like 9/11, Adam Walsh, the shooting. I think the school shooting where we got that fucking retard kid, whatever his name is, that is now the
David
head.
Hogg? Yeah.
David Hogg. I don't know if that's right in Broward County or it's near Broward County, which is all Debbie Wasserman Schultz, everybody.
Exactly.
Who is like, nobody talks about that bitch anymore. And the fact that her own trial, the prosecutor was her brother. Nobody ever talks about that. Unbelievable. It's great. Yeah, dude. Yeah. I mean, it's all connected, dude. And Project Gladio is the connection. It is it. It is this private military that is disguised as anti-communism, but in reality, it is just everything you hate in the world. But the final thing, because I can't keep going, because I'm gonna be stuck in traffic all night. So when everyone's like, let's get out of NATO, what's your thoughts on that? When Trump's like, we're gonna get out of NATO, everyone's like, let's get out of NATO. What is your thoughts on that?
Phenomenal. Go for it. I mean,
But do you think it's real? Do you think it's theater? Do you think?
I don't know. We're pretty damn obsolete at this point. So, I mean, I can kind of understand why we would step out of NATO. I mean, it is kind of pretty fucking pointless. It serves really. I mean, I think it just might be one of those things that just is a thing of the past, and it doesn't really serve anyone but Europe. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess I could be jaded and think, maybe something else. But, I mean, I don't know. It's been around for so long, and NATO's had no real reason to exist for so fucking long. So I don't know. It just
provides.
I think it might just be
guarantees.
too obvious to continue to exist. I don't know.
I don't think the effect or the consequential outcome of pulling out of NATO, would really have any sort of long-term effect beyond. Clearly we would be unplugging ourselves from the wartime guarantees from the deal itself, as far as just like the NATO allied countries. But still, I think that what should take priority is pulling out of the United Nations and absolving the United Nations, because I think the UN is really what helped kind of fully implement the Gladio network as that private intelligence operation that really spans the globe internationally and does not have to account for international or national borders in any way. And they found ways to kind of, breach those national borders in the first place anyway, by the plausible deniability of like using, religious groups and NGO organizations, right? So that alone, I think that the United Nations is really what should take priority. But I'm always up for any sort of people like to claim it's isolation as far as the policy is concerned.
I'm all for it, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm all for it.
Agreed.
All right, guys. You guys crushed. Great. So, I mean, mind blowing. Answers questions. One more time. Where can they find you?
Yeah, I have the No Way Jose podcast. Austin has the Underclass podcast. Me and him both do. Obviously, I have my solo work, so my solo stuff. You're only gonna be able to get on No Way Jose. But Already Dead, which is our weekly our live stream call-in show at Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. That is hosted on both of our channels. Also, along with our daily morning live stream called The Morning Dump, that is hosted on both our channels as well. That's the No Way Jose podcast that is on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcatchers as well. But as you can see here, it also goes out on Austin's as well, so you can get that on both. We also have our own solo content you can check out. But you can follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose. Probably the best thing if you want to start on my content, go to the playlists probably on YouTube would be the best place to start. Go check out my OKC stuff. That's probably the most I've done, the thing I've done the most coverage on. That's also, we didn't talk about that at all today, but I think that's probably a Gladio op as well. I don't know. It's almost the 30th anniversary. If anyone wants to bring me on to talk about how it's a Gladio op.
Gladio ops. Everyone's got a Gladio op.
Exactly. But yeah, follow me Twitter, Gang Jose. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you again.
Always a pleasure.
And yeah, with that,
Austin, where can they find you?
All right, guys, man. Just follow me at the Underclass Podcast, basically pretty much on all platforms at this point. But I would say also the best place to support me, if you have the means to do so, would be the Patreon. I'm trying to drive everyone to the Patreon at this point. And through becoming a subscriber to the Patreon, obviously you'll get access to the paywall content, which has been a blessing. Sam, I appreciate that. By the way, I just wanted to say how grateful I am because just having the show, whatever this is that we've been doing recently, I've definitely seen a difference as far as more supporters flowing in.
Whatever this is,
exactly. But just helping me create a few more incentives for supporting members. I can't thank you enough, brother. But beyond that, yeah, the Underclass Podcast at Patreon, and yeah, if you want to check out my work, any sort of solo work beyond what I've been doing with Jose, as far as Already Dead and The Morning Dump, the Underclass Podcast is kind of an interesting approach to some of this research, and I think that it's been great for me, like being able to do these various, as far as the shows, kind of like exploring my ability to, like, as far as it's an entirely different technique, that's for damn sure, as far as my approach to the research itself. But definitely start with, I think I guess probably the most well-liked episode that I've done so far is The Ultimate Evil, The Process Church of the Final Judgment. And then really, as far as my most recent episode has been doing very well as far as that was concerned. And that was the one about the Fort Bragg murders and Jeffrey McDonald. So definitely, if you're interested to discover a new podcast and find someone who's attempting to objectively approach these cases as well as I can, check it out, man, at the Underclass Podcast.
Don't mean to cut you off, but I totally forgot, and Top Lobster is going to be mad at me if I forget. Well, I guess it's kind of two there, but mainly I want to say toplobster.com. There's an Already Dead page. You can get merch. There's Yiki shirts, Trying to Do shirts. There's Operation Gladio shirts. There's Already Dead shirts as well. So if that's something you want, go check that toplobster.com. With that, also, Top Lobster is my homie. I'm literally about to go on Tower Gang within the hour. So go check out Tower Gang if you like offensive comedy. Every Wednesday at 9:11 p.m. Eastern. Obvious joke is obvious. Towers, haha. But we are, we're the most offensive comedy podcast out there. We go hard. We have fun. That's me, Top Lobster, Clint Russell, Cole, and Toad.
All right.
Go check that out.